Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 136 of ThROH The Years, the podcast reviews Ring of Honor, show by show, from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame, and I'm joined, as always, by the co-host, Matt Feuerstein. And Matt, I think, because we did a special non-canon, non-counted episode, doesn't have a number behind it, episode of ThROH The Years for our last edition, this is the longest we've ever gone between canon, just reviewing the shows through the years episodes. I think our last one went up October 20th, so it's been well over a month. What a time it's been, Matt.
Yeah, at least this time when we've had an extended break, it wasn't because of personal tragedies. Maybe global ones, but not personal ones. So that's nice for a change. But I tragically regret to inform you that we're back and we're reviewing Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning as we were meant to do. Apologies for anybody who missed this and we're like, when is 136 popping up? Lucky 136. This is it. Here we go. Rock and roll.
But I would like, before we get to the show, I would like to thank everyone that sent us nice comments, and DMs and things about the Bryan Danielson special edition episode that we did for our last episode that we kind of broke with tradition just to do that special episode. That was Matt's baby. And it's something that Matt had been talking about to me, like we should do this for, I don't know if it was a year ahead of time, but it was a long time ahead of time we were talking about
put it all on me. Blame me for it. Thanks. I appreciate it.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think we've ever gotten, I've shown you some, but not all of them. I don't think we've ever gotten so many nice comments about an episode of ThROH The Years as that Bryan Danielson special, which on one hand, I was really happy. I was happy for you and I was happy for both of us, but especially because, it was your idea and I felt like it really paid off. It was a fun thing and I was relieved that people liked it. There was a couple people that said either they listened to it all in one sitting or close to one sitting. There was someone that told me they wished it was longer. And I was thinking, the only other episode that we've gotten as we get drips and drabs consistently of nice feedback about ThROH The Years, but the one other episode that got close to as much positive feedback was the At Our Best episode, where that was also a 6-hour episode where the first 3 hours were completely different than anything we had done before or since, where we devoted 3 hours just to covering the Rob Feinstein scandal story of 2004. So Matt, I think the people have told us what they want from this podcast, which is they like it when we do 6-hour episodes that are completely different than the regular show we've done for 136 episodes. Yeah. Well, what they're saying is we like you when you do something different.
Well, I mean, obviously we as incredibly busy, important people don't have time to do 6-hour episodes on a regular basis. We have so much going on. We have just way too much way too rich and full lives to devote 6 hours to. I got to stop talking. I'm going to start crying. So, but yeah, no, thanks. If people really liked it, I really appreciate it because it was something I thought about for a while, and I appreciate everybody, all of our friends who helped us out and participated and sent in audio and joined us. That made a huge difference too. So yeah, if you liked it, I mean, that's great. I hope you did. It meant something to me. So I hope that it meant something to at least some of you. And thank you again. Thanks, Trevor, for indulging me.
No, you did great. It was like a good old Listen and Learn again, the Superior Wrestling Podcast. And I almost forgot. I'm glad you brought it up because Matt, as always, the more considerate of us, to thank everyone that contributed, all our past guests that sent in files, and obviously Justin Shapiro, Alan Cunahan, and even sadly Joe Gagney, who came in with us to record like a whole extra hour plus to tag into the show. So, everyone that contributed, too many to name. Thank you guys so much. You were also shared in that. I'm sure that helped get more praise and, not a bad apple in the bunch, Matt. But that brings us to our show today. It's back to the grind, Matt. It is the 5th year festival, Dayton. And
I thought you were going to review an old episode of MTV's The Grind with Eric Nies.
Matt, I have no reference for that. For that reference, we had much music in Canada, Matt, not this dang MTV. playing their guitars on it. I have no truck with that MTV. I don't know what's on it. I imagine I hear tell there was some show called The Real World that
Well, Eric Nees is from The Real World, the first season, and he ended up being made the host of a afternoon show called The Grind, which basically it played music and cut interspersed between the music videos to just like attractive people dancing. And he would host it and talk about how it was the grind and what was up next, and people were dancing, and they were, I guess, attractive, and that's what happened. And you could look it up on Wikipedia, and it tells you all of where the special filming locations of the grind were over the years, through the years, as it were.
Is that something you were looking at because you want to visit all the locations of the grind? You want to do the grind?
Yeah, well, I'm already in one of them in New York. But
you are living in one of them.
Look, I'm looking right now. It says late summer 1995. The grind was filmed at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge in Brooklyn, New York, with a carnival theme complete with carnival rides, clowns, and jugglers. It was at the point Eric Nees would gradually be replaced as the host of the grind. Well, I've been at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. I didn't see any jugglers when I was there, but I've been over there. I was not in Zuma Beach, California, for summer of 1994, though.
I'm willing to bet Zuma Beach, California, probably more fun to be at than the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. But
hey,
I'm not sure.
hey, I'm mad about it. I'm mad that you said that about my home.
Matt, I've been under a couple bridges in my life. It was never a good experience. I'm just saying. If you tell me under any bridge is a good experience, I don't think it is.
Hey, the Brooklyn Bridge, forget about it. Hey.
Well, again, what we're here to remember, the 5th Year Festival date, and it took place February 23rd, 2007, at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds in Dayton, Ohio, in front of a reported crowd of 600 fans. I believe the last show, Suffocation, that they did there did 400, so they're back up. You know, that seemed like Joe's farewell tour has been a bit of a draw. They've been doing like, most of these markets feel like they've been doing like the upper level of what you generally would expect from them. So, and I could not find official pre-show results on Cage Match because Cage Match is spy about reporting them, but I did hunt them down and I'm glad I did in this case because this is from PW Insider reader Aaron S. Rund, who was at the show, and he submitted them. And there's a little interesting note here. In pre-show action, Rhett Titus and Bobby Dempsey defeated Alex Sugarfoot Payne and John Moxley. This would be
my God. Oh my.
I believe this is the first time John Moxley ever worked a Ring of Honor show, unless there was a cage, like a dark match I missed. And he would work almost no Ring of Honor. I think he would work a few like dark matches in the future, but I don't even know if he ever worked a non-dark match. And you know, because he never really got he never got a Ring of Honor run. One match
at Final Battle 2023, which was, of course, put on by the promotion Ring of Honor, the independent wrestling promotion known as Ring of Honor.
But actually, he would get booked extensively by Gabe Sapolsky and Dragon Gate USA, but, you know, not here. So I guess you could say if Gabe stuck around, he probably would have eventually got a shot in Ring of Honor, but obviously that guy's career fizzled out because he didn't get that shot. So also on this pre-show, Shane Hagedorn defeated Ernie Osiris, or as our friend Aaron S. Run says, Eddie Osiris, to retain the top of the class trophy. And Sarah Del Rey defeated Josie in a good women's match. Simply Josie.
No pussycats.
Yes, I was thinking of that reference, and I'm glad you made it. We open in the ring with Bobby Cruz introducing who he calls the voice of Ring of Honor, Dave Prazak. Dave tells us that the tradition in ROH is when someone wins the ROH World title, the next show starts with an interview with that new world champion. And so he introduces the new Ring of Honor World Champion, Takeshi Morishima. After Morishima's theme music plays for quite a while with no Takeshi appearance, Nigel McGuinness comes out instead, and we cut to the same 5th Year Festival video package that has been opening this entire series of these 5th Year Festival branded shows. And when it ends, Nigel's in the ring. He has the mic. He says tomorrow night he has a very important match teaming with Morishima, and because of that, NOAH officers have sent Nigel out tonight to speak for him. Nigel says normally the new champ would be interviewed, but Morishima never gets in this ring unless he's going to kick somebody's ass. He says tonight against BJ Whitmer, Morishima will be in this ring. At this point, the Irish Airborne jump into the ring and get a loud chant from their local fans. Dave Chris says this business is all about opportunities, so how about sometime Nigel and Morishima team up to face them? Nigel asks if they're sure that's what they really want, but Morishima has already run to the ring in street clothes. He attacks them. Nigel just says as Morishima's starting to attack them, hey, you've got your opportunity. And Morishima proceeds to destroy Irish Airborne 1-on-2. He catches Dave Crist flying out of midair and slams him down. He hits Jake with a backdrop driver. He makes a pin on him that Nigel counts, so I guess call this an unofficial match. Morishima immediately goes to the back, but Nigel is going to leave. But then Jimmy Jacobs, Brent Albright, and Lacey make their way to the ring. The crowd chants for Jimmy Jacobs and Lacey. And Lacey asks why they're not chanting for her instead. She says, do you not realize that later you get to witness me destroy Daisy Hayes? Lacey says her first order of business, though, is Nigel. She's never had a problem with him, but tonight, for some reason, he's decided to team with Colt Cabana against her team. Colt's mention draws a very loud chant from the crowd. Lacey says Nigel should escort himself out of the ring in this match and let them take care of Colt Cabana 2-on-1. The crowd chants slut at Lacey, and Nigel says he isn't going to succumb to a threat from a cheap, dirty slag like her, so he'll have that match anytime those fellas want. Jacobs and Albright jump in the ring, and Jimmy Rave then climbs in as well, surprising Nigel from behind, taking him down, putting him in the heel hook until Colt Cabana runs to the ring. Rave runs away scared. Colt starts attacking Jimmy and Brent, and our opening match is on. So before we get to the match, I guess, they're still trying to establish that Morishima is like, this no-nonsense ass kicker, that, Nigel has this affiliation with him. The Jimmy Rave thing, obviously, keeping that feud alive until it's a blow off. But I guess the one thing I really noticed with the segment match, and it's unfair comparison because Morishima was still brand new to the company, but it felt like everybody in the segment got more of a reaction than Morishima.
That's exactly what I wrote. He got the least, including, but Irish Airborne were locals, but they got a much bigger reaction than her. But yes, it was very noticeable. Hopefully by the end of the night that will be remedied, but we'll see if it is or not. But I would say that your description made it sound almost less convoluted than it came across in actuality, the entire segment. I definitely did not expect Irish Airborne to show up at the moment that they did. That was a surprise. Clearly it was...
And they do not do anything else for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
They get the big hometown reaction, they get destroyed, and that's... And I don't think this leads to anything.
No, it was just there. It was clearly just there, these are two sacrificial lambs for Morishima. Yeah. And I understand the purpose, but it wasn't as effective as it sounded on paper. And then, of course, you have to, even Nigel has to get in on the misogyny train because that's just what things were like in 2007 with that comment toward Lacey. He also mentions that, when he says Morishima says he never gets in the ring unless he's going to kick someone's ass. I want to keep an eye on how long that policy sticks for. If that's something that he really maintains throughout his run in ROH, he never gets in the ring unless he's kicking ass, or if they adapt that. Obviously, I don't know if they're already decided that Nigel's going to be the guy to take the belt off of Morishima. I'm guessing yes. And so this association is sort of building to that. I'm curious to see how that develops, or if just all of a sudden Nigel is pitted against Morishima, because I don't totally remember that. But yeah, I just thought it was just a little bit too much, a little bit, as Nick Weiger of Doughboys would say, Unga Pachka. Just one thing too many between Prazak calling out Morishima, then Nigel appearing as a surprise, then Irish Airborne appearing as a surprise, then Morishima appearing as a surprise, then the interaction between Lacey and Nigel, and then Jimmy Rave popping up. It's just I don't know. I mean, I get you want, to be an eventful opening segment, but it felt like it was more just doing stuff just to do it than anything particularly productive. The one productive element, I suppose, is that it set up Nigel's selling of his leg in this match that we're about to review.
Yeah, which brings us to that match, which is Colt Cabana and Nigel McGuinness defeat Brent Albright and Jimmy Jacobs, escorted to the ring by Lacey, in 13 minutes, 3 seconds, when Nigel pinned Jacobs after hitting the rebound lariat. Matt, you already kind of touched on one of the main points of the match. What did you think about the entire thing?
Well, a lot of the match was Nigel selling the leg, like for a long, long time. He actually, I think, kind of felt out of place, Nigel did, because in this whole thing, because he wasn't really involved, and you sort of see Nigel as maybe being on a tier above this in terms of like just like, I don't know, more dignified level of wrestling compared to this feud that's been kind of gritty and maybe a little bit soap opera-y at times. But I guess the idea was probably they were still thinking that Nigel and Colt would end up being a regular tag team in 2007 before Colt ended up leaving for WWE. So I'm assuming that's why he was involved here. One early spot that I thought was funny was when Albright threw Jacobs into Nigel in the corner, almost like a launch drop kick, which, by the way, was a spot that was done like multiple times by both Albright and by Colt Cabana at one point, just like launching Jacobs' legs into people. But what I thought was funny was Lenny Leonard accidentally called Albright BJ Whitmer, and he acted like he was so embarrassed by this mistake. He was like, "What, BJ Whitmer? What am I talking about? Well, I can't believe BJ Whitmer." I was like, "All right, it's it happens, not that big of a deal." So I thought that was kind of amusing.
Yeah, Lenny had big me in the first 5 episodes of this podcast energy, where I make a mistake that lasts 3 seconds, and I spend another 30 seconds berating myself over the mistake.
Probably actually more.
Now I just do that in my head.
Yeah, I was going to say probably actually in your head, probably another 7.5 years that you've been doing that. Yeah, I mean, eventually after a long time, Cabana comes in, does a pretty typical hot tag, and then you get sort of this back and forth, right? Nigel is favoring his leg a lot because it was worked over for a long time, but he still hits a running European uppercut, like while limping. He gets some lariats in. There's a spot where Jacobs sends Cabana to the floor, and Nigel goes to rebound lariat Jacobs, but Albright grabs his arm and goes right into the crowbar, and Cabana shoves Jacobs into the ref, and Jacobs. And then Jacobs falls onto Nigel, and Sinclair is down, and Albright tries to go up and over Cabana, but Cabana catches him, and they turn it into like a double team Tower of London. And then eventually Albright tries to wake up Sinclair, and Jacobs takes actually a string from a guitar that he brought and starts choking Cabana with it. So a new weapon that he found. I don't know if he's setting that up for the next night. I guess we'll see when we review it. Because, by the way, the next night is the big Windy City street fight between Jacobs and Cabana, the blow-off of their feud. But Nigel breaks it up and hits the rebound lariat and gets the win. I thought that the structure ended up being interesting enough that I liked the match. I didn't love it. I thought it was kind of sloppy. I definitely think they could do better this foursome, but I thought it was pretty good. I'm still antsy for this whole Lacey, Jimmy, Whitmer, Colt feud to be over. Even when the matches are usually pretty good, I'm just like, okay, I'm kind of over this. I'm ready for the big blow-offs, and luckily we're getting them soon. But yeah, I would say this was all right opener, kind of interesting, kind of weird, like us, Trevor. Kind of interesting, kind of weird. Very nice, very evil.
This was basically, I felt like this was 2 matches. Like when Colt ran in to start before the match and he starts taking on Brent and Jimmy, it felt like we could be off to like a hot start. But then as soon as the ref starts the match, he immediately forces Colt to the corner to be the illegal man. And so the entire first half of the match, like you said, is nothing but Jimmy and Albright working over the leg that Jimmy Rave just injured with the heel hook. And I would describe the leg work in this match as simultaneously brisk and methodical. Like Jacobs and Albright kept tagging back and forth quickly, but all they did was work on the leg. But a good portion of that leg work was just like stomping and pulling on it. So it was like they were kind of energetically doing kind of boring stuff. For me, like for the legwork to last, like again, like the entire first half of the match, I would have liked it to have been just a little bit more engaging. But when Nigel tags out, Colt has a fairly like meaty sequence where he's beating up Jimmy and Albright 1-on-2 for a while, and really starting with that, the entire second half of the match is pretty brisk. It's filled with a lot more action. I would say one flaw in it for me would be when Nigel gets back involved for a match where that's the entire first half, like laser focused on his leg. the match pays almost no attention to it in the second half. And it feels
He does make sure to limp even as he's doing all the running moves.
Yeah, he sells it, but they don't really focus on, because it feels like that's because they were more concerned with giving you like your standard ROH, everyone's going in and out of the ring, sprint to the finish, and working on the leg more in the second half of the match would have slowed it down. But like you said, Nigel does sell. In fact, he does one bit of selling I really like where he does this corner-to-corner running European uppercut, but he runs visibly slower than normal, and you can hear him shout, "Oh, motherfuck," in pain as he powers through the injury. And he immediately after he hits even the European uppercut, he sells his leg. So I actually did think his leg selling was good. It just was weird where it was like you work over his leg the entire first half of the match. He's selling it the entire match, but the second half you're like, we're not going to pay attention. But again, probably because they just want to have a brisk second half of the match. And one thing else that was interesting to me in this match was, when you, like I mentioned sometimes before, when you watch every show sequentially, sometimes you see how things grow with wrestlers. So like I've noticed where like, it just seems like a few shows ago, we really started Jimmy breaking out that move where he gets like someone picks him up in the atomic drop position. They lawn dart him into like a drop kick. And like you said, Colt does it in this match. Jimmy has it done. Jimmy does it. And I think it happens 3 times in this match. So you get to see the evolution of
twice by his own partner and once by Cabana.
Yeah. So you get to see this evolution of like, from it being like, oh, that's kind of a neat spot to like, let's milk the shit out of this thing.
Yeah.
And I thought the end was interesting too, where Jimmy was choking Colt, working over his throat that he had injured on the last double shot with the high heel shoe, and Nigel ends up hitting the rebound lariat on him for the win while he's distracted doing that. So it gives Jimmy like this slight out because he was so focused on hurting Colt, one of the 2 wrestlers he's currently feuding with, that he left himself open for Nigel, the one guy, as you pointed out in this match, that really has no personal beef with anybody. But the weird part for me was that he was choking him with the guitar string. So I didn't pay attention to this. Like, I don't think did Jimmy bring a guitar to the ring?
Well, I mean, they seem to indicate that he did. I did not notice, and I did not rewind to go check. So, rewind. That's how old I am. But yeah, I assume he must have because there's a guitar involved, and no one else would have had it. I don't think Jeff Jarrett, the Honky Tonk Man, or Elias were part of this sequence, so it had to be Jimmy. He is the emo rock star at the moment.
Because the really weird thing about this spot to me was not only did I not catch him bring the guitar to the ring, he pulls out a guitar and then like he has to take a few seconds to de-string the guitar and then choke Colt with the strings. And I don't know if I've ever seen another time in wrestling history where someone pulled out a guitar in the wrestling match and they didn't just hit the guy with the guitar. They were like, no, I'm just going straight for the strings. And it was like, why didn't you just bring strings if that was your plan? Or a rope or more ring tape?
Well, clearly because it wasn't his plan, but then he got this diabolical idea. And I am curious to see if like this is like setting up a spot that they're going to repeat in their more serious street fight match at the next show. I'm going to keep my eye out for it because I do not remember one way or the other.
And like you, I also think this match was it had to be about like building Nigel and Colt up for a tag title shot because we mentioned on a recent show where why would Nigel and Colt beat the Briscoes right before the Briscoes are about to win the tag titles? And again, I have to think why all of a sudden they're teaming again together and stacking up a couple significant wins. It had to have been the original plan was Nigel and Colt to get a match with the Briscoes after they win the tag titles, and Colt ends up signing for WWE, so you can't do that. But overall, I'd say the first half of this match was average, kind of boring bit of focused limb work, and the second half was a good but nothing mind-blowing sprinty tag match that you've seen a lot of times here in Ring of Honor. So let's do the old split the difference. I'll give this like an above average, but nothing special. This was also the match. I don't know if he was sporting these before, but I noticed in this match, Jimmy Jacobs real giant ass Steve Austin style knee brace here, and this was I imagine a point where Jimmy was really because he was going to need surgery after the Whitmer feud ended. So he and Jimmy Rave are 2 guys on this card just kind of gutting things out with injuries that are going to need surgical help until they can get through these feuds they're done with. But
Well, I thought when you said he had a giant ass knee brace, I thought for a second you were saying Jimmy Jacobs is the first time you noticed he had such a giant ass, and I was like, well, I myself have not noticed that, but I'm gonna keep an eye out for his badonkadonk, as I learned 20 years ago on Chappelle's show what that meant.
you just are full of TV references tonight. It's great.
I'm always full of TV references. It's one of my things.
Raised by TV.
Yes.
We then go backstage for yet another 2007 ROH promo where the person is looking not into the camera but to the side. I just wrote my notes in all capital letters, "End this period." BJ Whitmer tells a wall that title shots here in Ring of Honor are hard to come by. You have to go out of your way to earn one here in ROH. BJ thinks he's earned one when he and Jimmy Jacobs fell off the top rope in Michigan and he broke his ankle and he got back up. He earned it when Super Dragon dumped him on his head and he got back up. He earned it when Samoa Joe knocked him out cold with a kick to the head and he got back up. He earned this when he had his flesh torn in a barbed wire match against Necro Butcher. Whitmer says Morishima looked unstoppable against Homicide, and no one looks unstoppable against Homicide. Then BJ says people keep asking him why he keeps getting back up, and it's because he was hearing those fans. They told him to get back up, including here in this building for that barbed wire match. Whitmer says, like Homicide did in New York City when he won the world title and had the biggest party of the year, tonight Whitmer's going to have the biggest party of the year in Dayton, Ohio when he wins the ROH title. I have a hard time believing that the biggest party of any year has ever been held or ever will be held in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh man, what a diss! That's not right. I'm not co-signing that. But I will say that it's funny. Like whenever you get these promos at this point where the guys are like looking off into the distance away from the camera, I'm always hoping that they'll like pull the camera to the side and it'll just be like a delivery guy being like, are you going to pay for this pizza? Or, like something like that. That's got to be how this whole series ends, but I guess we don't know.
Yeah. Man, I doubt there will be, but I would love if there was a payoff to that.
Yes.
But we now go to our second main card match. Jimmy Rave defeats Sterling Keenan via submission in 5 minutes, 50 seconds when he made him tap out to the heel hook. So, yeah, this is the last time we are going to see the future Corey Graves, Sterling Keenan, on Through the Years. He does work a couple more matches in ROH in 2009 against Eric Stevens and Delirious, but, Matt, we ain't ever getting to those. We have a lot of Through the Years to go. We ain't going that far.
Yes.
So the most interesting part of this match for me is not the match itself, it's the commentary, because they do a thing that Ring of Honor does fairly often in their history up to this point, where they talk about how for one wrestler in the match, in this case Sterling Keenan, this is a chance to get noticed, get full-time work, ROH is taking a look at them, etc. And the interesting thing to me is this is a match that kind of reminded me, like, there are times where Ring of Honor would say that during a match like this about the wrestler, and that wrestler would get future bookings. But there were times like this one where, like, nope, they lose a relatively, like, nondescript match, and Gabe never books them again. And in a way, it's good for ROH because that's more realistic. Like, you don't sign every wrestler you take a look at. And honestly, Keenan doesn't stand out here. He's fine. Like, I would say here he works a very generic match where he gets some offense, but doesn't really grab you with anything apart from he does like a fireman's carry position into a backbreaker that looks nice. But if I was in Keenan's position, I would almost prefer it if they didn't emphasize that this was essentially a tryout for me, based on the fact that it just emphasizes that I'm being rejected if I don't get booked again. Like, I'd rather just be like, just don't call attention to it. Maybe it was just a one-off for me and it wouldn't have mattered or something. Like, don't act like, oh, this is a tryout for him. And then, because then it just makes, I just kind of felt bad the way they kept going on about that. But in this match, Rave, meanwhile, I would say he's very much back in his comfort zone. A lot of crowd interaction, screaming at a bored fan to go to sleep, which made me chuckle. Emphatically disagreeing with another fan as to if he is or isn't gay. Overall, I would say, Matt, this was a very insignificant, instantly forgettable, unoffensive match. It's the kind of thing that where Keenan's never really going to get a chance to stand out second from the bottom, working 6 minutes against Jimmy Rave. And the match itself, it doesn't add anything to the card. It's just padding. But again, inoffensive. I would say everything that Sterling James Keenan had done in Ring of Honor was I would describe as inoffensive. Like, nothing where I'd be like, oh, this was bad, but nothing where I'd be like, oh, you have to have that guy back.
Yeah, so I mean, this match definitely does not feel like a match worthy of an anniversary show, right?
Yeah,
it's just like a total like B minus show undercard match, and I wonder a couple things. First of all, are they trying to give Rave an easy night because of his injury? And also, this is replacing the fact that Rave was supposed to wrestle Samoa Joe on this show and not the week before, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
what? So
They had to switch the order of the last show was supposed to be Davey Richards and Joe, and this was supposed to be Rave and Joe. But because Richards was hurt and couldn't work the last double shot, they switched the order to these two shows.
yeah, I'm assuming they wouldn't have just done Davey Richards versus Sterling Keenan on the show. He maybe would have been in that 6-way. I don't know. But yeah, so this match was a replacement that was meant to not be much, and it wasn't much. No one got a chance to really impress. Yeah, it was noticeable that Rave definitely reverted more to the embassy version of himself, where he was jawing with the fans and stuff, as opposed to being all business.
Jawing, get it? Because he had a broken jaw.
Oh yeah, see, good. I definitely meant to do that.
You're a poet and you didn't know it.
I knew. I always know. But yeah, just extremely basic, simple, completely forgettable. I would say didn't belong on a show like this, but I get why they had to throw it on there.
I felt bad for Ken, like before when he comes to the ring, he goes like a couple times to Dayton, Ohio. He's like, make some noise. And they don't really. And to me, I always feel really bad for someone when they do the make some noise or come on, city, I'm in, like, let me hear you. And they I'm like, man.
You gotta own it and turn it into a gimmick, right? Where it's like, you're the guy that gets no reaction. I just really beg for a reaction and not get one. Like when Jeb Bush said, please clap.
Sterling Keenan, the Jeb Bush of Ring of Honor.
Baby.
big Sterling energy. But before the match, also, did you notice a couple fans, I didn't mention this, threw toilet paper in the ring, which I thought was banned by Ring of Honor, and Rave does acknowledge it. So I wonder if Ring of Honor stuck to their guns and really did throw fans out into the second match of the show, or if they were just like, guys, knock it off, because they made a big deal about stopping them, saying like, look, from now, they made that official announcement, if you do this from now on, you throw the toilet paper, you're going to get thrown out. We don't want that anymore. And I think this is like the first time I really noticed that since they made that proclamation, that a couple fans, they just didn't care, Matt, or they didn't know.
I feel like, I don't know. I get the sense they probably would have given a warning first before throwing people out, because not everyone follows that closely. But who knows? Jeff Schwartz probably knows. He had his ear to the ground. Got to ask him. I'm sure, Jeff, did they immediately throw people out when they threw toilet paper in 2007, or did they give him a warning first? Let us know, please.
After the match, Nigel limp runs to the ring, still selling the leg. He attacks Rave, who flees to ringside, where Nigel attacks him more, hitting him with a running European uppercut that causes him to break the barricade. And then they brawl to the back of the building before we go to our next match, and that would be Lacey scored to the ring by Jimmy Jacobs, defeats Daisy Hayes via pinfall in 8 minutes, 17 seconds after Jimmy Jacobs speared Daisy. This is a real rarity in Ring of Honor, which is not just a women's match, but a women's match built around a feud that has actually been built up to. But it's such a rarity that in Ring of Honor that Dave Prazak on commentary pretty much says that has never happened before in Ring of Honor. And I'm not sure if this is technically the first time that's ever happened, but it was definitely wow, it's not just a women's match, but a women's match they've actually built up to a bit. What'd you think about it?
I thought that it was just novel that they got this amount of time. I definitely think it's another match that probably takes the mantle just kind of by default of best women's match in ROH history up to this point, because the bar was low. There was some sloppiness, but the intensity was pretty good. I know they have a better match in them, and I'm pretty sure I've seen their better match, and I think we're going to get to it eventually. But I thought this was solid for what you could expect at this point. Lacey was really good. I find it interesting that, she obviously, her character since very early on has been pretty shrill, and she's sort of developed a character now where there's a little bit more light-heartedness to her shtick. I don't know if you've noticed that. Even though she has this intense, you need to kill Colt Cabana and all this stuff, the way she interacts with the crowd, she kind of, no pun intended at all, but just for the wrestling term, shows a little more ass than she would in the past, where she kind of allows herself to be the butt of jokes. For instance, when the crowd does their, inappropriate, annoying, misogynistic, she's got herpes chant, she yells like, "How do you people know what my doctor says?" Like stuff like, instead of being like what she would do, like, "How dare you? You're all disgusting," blah blah blah. She sort of lets herself be the butt of that joke. You know what? I don't know if you
Yeah.
noticed that at all. Like
No, yeah, I did actually.
yeah. So, but I thought this was fast paced. Um, you know, uh, Lacey clotheslines Hayes. Hayes hits a Thez press. Lacey dives off the top rope to the floor. Excuse me. Hayes dives off the top rope to the floor on Lacey and Jacob. So they go at it pretty fast. Lacey actually does this cool bow and arrow, but with Hayes's back bending around the ring post. I thought that was really cool. Some good suplexes, and I thought Hayes did a pretty decent job selling. But I was thinking like maybe just having a few more hope spots. There was an ongoing storyline where Delirious was watching the show from the crowd and just almost like catatonic because he had been injured the week before, legit, with a concussion against Roderick Strong, and so he wasn't wrestling here. I don't know. Maybe makes me wonder if they would have done Davey Richards versus Delirious actually on this show. In fact, for all I know, that match was announced because they sometimes announce matches in advance. But Delirious was in the crowd just kind of watching, and the way they cut to him, it makes it feel like they're like covering for a botch. I don't know if that's true or if that's just, just artlessly throwing that shot in there, but that's how it looked just because it was so abrupt. But that'll play, that'll come into play later. But Hayes comes back with palm strikes, a super kick. Lacey goes for the heart punch. Hayes reverses that. At one point near the end, Hayes hits the heart punch and 2 Yakuza kicks, and that's when Jacobs hits the ring and spears her behind the ref's back, and Lacey gets a pretty blatantly cheap win. I thought, that win was just super cheap after such a back and forth match, and the crowd chants bullshit, so they agreed. But yeah, I mean, the bar is low. These two did a good job. I know they could do a better job, and they will. So I don't want to praise it too much, but I thought it was pretty good for what it was.
Yeah. It was an interesting match to me because I will first off I will give big props to these two. They wrestle it like they're in a feud, which always gets points from me because I always hate when people have been in a feud for a while and they finally get to wrestle and they wrestle it like with no extra added emotion. Daisy charges the ring. She doesn't wait for the bell to start. She immediately attacks Lacey, and then Lacey proceeds to really kick Daisy's ass. And in fact, to me, that's the story of this match, and it's the best part of this match, but it's also in some ways kind of the weakness. I would say this is the stiffest women's match in ROH history. Lacey kicks Daisy in the chest hard. She's generally just clubbing her throughout. She's like you mentioned, that great bow and arrow spot against the ring post where she's really stretching her back. She hits a nice Cobra Clutch backbreaker and a big running knee to the back. And Daisy takes some like big ass bumps in this match, like just that wild bump where she's whipped into the barricade and she hits it so hard she immediately flips head over feet into the front row, really with real speed and momentum. Like as my dad would have said, she flipped ass over tea kettle, which when I remembered that my dad used to say, I looked that up just to make sure it was a phrase and not something insane he said. And it turns out, yes, that is something people used to say. And like
Brian Alvarez still uses that term, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, Brian Alvarez is very old timey.
It's a Pacific Northwest term, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Daisy takes a big belly to back suplex that she almost turns into a backdrop driver. She rotates so much, so she was really taking a hellacious beating in this match. But the negative for me is, like I alluded to earlier, like Lacey to me almost kicked Daisy's ass too much in a match she wins because, well, there's a positive and negative to it. Like I actually sometimes get mildly annoyed by the number of indie wrestling matches where you can tell who is going to lose by who is getting the most offense, because it becomes this little trade of, okay, since I'm going to win, I'm going to give you the majority of the match before the finish. So in that sense, it's refreshing that this match doesn't tip its hand. But on the other hand, I think it's kind of a big bummer to have a grudge match like this happen that they've built for a little while, have the face get beat up for most of the match, and then also lose it in addition to that. Like, and really, until the finish where Jacobs runs in to hit the spear and cheat, Lacey isn't even cheating to get or maintain control. She's just beating Daisy straight up. Like, Daisy does get some offense. Like, she gets a bit of offense at the start, including where she does the big dive to the floor off the top turnbuckle to wipe out Lacey and Jimmy. And she gets some at the end. But this is mostly Lacey dominating. So it's the most fun part of the match from a pure wrestling standpoint, but it's also maybe a slight emotional bummer from the booking standpoint. And my other problem with this match would be, well, like a lot of the offense Lacey throws here looks good. There's also a fair number of strikes that don't look great, particularly from Daisy. And normally I'm a big fan of Daisy in ROH up to this point. I think she stood out a bit with the real limited in-ring opportunity that she and all women in Ring of Honor have been given. But this match also reminded me that sometimes some of her offense can look kind of weak. Her bumping in this match, absolutely great. The end of the match, was also to me a bit of a negative where I don't mind Jacobs cheating to help Lacey win, but the spear happens like a foot or two away from the ref who's being distracted by Lacey, and the momentum from the move actually takes Jimmy from behind the ref to in front of him. So it's another one of those, how could he have not seen this kind of spots? But overall, I'd give this another above average. There was like a good bit of fun ass kicking here. You still had some flaws to it, but overall, like I had a good time watching this for a relatively short match. Like you mentioned, they're cutting to Delirious in the crowd because they want him involved on this show because he can't work the matches because he got that big serious concussion against Roderick Strong on the last show, but they're still going to use him. And Lacey also came out to Kiss to Kill, which it's a little weird that like she's coming out to a song she clearly doesn't like that's Jimmy's instead of her own music, and she always seems annoyed by it and like confused. Like you would think she would just tell someone like, why are you do not play this song, play the song I've always had. But
no, but what was funny about it is, Kiss to Kill, like one of the gimmicks is like, it has very soft spoken verses and then a screamy chorus. And she would come out and be like, this, I don't like this. This doesn't get me pumped up. But then the chorus would kick in, and she goes, "Oh, that's better." And it's like, you've heard the song. Like you come out with Jimmy to this song before. You know how it goes. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, Lacey, underrated. When the little bit of comedy she does occasionally, she's good at that.
Yeah, like I said, she's incorporating more of it at this point.
For some reason, I had one of those "where are they now" moments I occasionally have with a wrestler since the last episode, and I looked up what Lacey is doing now. Have you ever
don't dox Lacey, Trevor? Don't dox her.
No, she's on. It's fully disclosed. She's on the website. She's an acupuncturist in Minnesota.
Yes.
And it looks like she is part of a fun practice full of happy people who are helping people with pain. So good on them. Honestly, in the grand scheme of lives former pro wrestlers have settled into, probably like in the upper tier of happy outcomes, it looks like. But after the match, once the heels leave, Daisy gets a pretty big Daisy Hayes chant. We cut to Rebecca Bayless, who is standing next to Delirious in the crowd, wondering what he's doing here, noting that he's not medically cleared after the concussion he suffered against Roderick Strong at the last show. Delirious responds to Rebecca's questions with silence. And yeah, like we said before, Delirious is going to be at this show and the next show the next night, but they're going to leave him. And that is something that Ring of Honor did that some indies didn't do, which is, like, I don't know if he got paid. I know BJ Whitmer on a shoot interview talked about how they found reasons to pay him during his injury, even if he didn't really do anything, or a couple times I think they paid him half salary, even if he didn't appear on the show. And it felt like, if you were a more significant name like that level or Joe level or something, if you did have to miss a show, they would often still try and give you something to do and probably give you something to come away from it from, which, it's nice in the economy of indie wrestling, which is not robust to say the least. But we then go backstage to a way too extreme close-up of Austin Aries. Like, there is no reason to be this close to his face. I can almost see the pores.
Yeah, and by the way, I could not tell in this interview if Aries couldn't get a grip on the whole idea of not looking at the camera, or if he was intentionally like playing with this gimmick of looking at the camera and then not looking at the camera and then looking away again and then looking back, and it was very confusing. And I'm guessing that he himself was confused by this bizarre stylistic choice.
It was so close to his face. I was waiting for like a Spaceballs Darth helmet moment where like the camera eventually just ran into his face and knocked him down. But Aries says in his battle against Roderick Strong, he's going to find the best young talent in this business, be it in ROH, FIP, or across the oceans, and he's going to bring them to ROH to wage war on Roddy. Aries says that lately Matt Seidel has been walking around with a real cocky smirk on his face, so now he's going to wipe it off when he wins the Open the Brave Gate title and takes it back to Dragon Gate. Then he says he's going to sit down after that with a pen and notebook and see just who exactly opens his eyes here in Ring of Honor. Matt, these days, would anyone sit down with a pen and notebook, or would they just sit down with their phone? This is one of the great things we've lost in the last 15 to 20 years, man.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely my takeaway from this show
Yeah,
is how bad it
bring
is.
back trees.
Yeah, bring back
Bring back the destruction of trees.
trees.
My dad worked in
Yep.
the lumber industry. We must destroy trees. They're our enemy. They will destroy us all if we let them.
We've been watching too much Lord of the Rings, I think.
I am a big nature fan. I'm not a fan. I'm a supporter of nature. I don't really love to live with it. I admire it from afar. But it was funny because like I felt that way. But like I grew up in a household like where all my dad's coworkers were around. So it was a lot of like, don't hug a tree, hug a lumberjack. Like bumper stickers and stuff like that was very much all over my face as a kid. So,
You and Brian Danielson's dad were big loggers.
exactly. I never dug clams, but I have seen some logs come tumbling down. But
not just in the bathroom.
good, good God! But that brings us to Homicide, defeating Christopher Daniels, escorted to the ring by Allison Danger, and Jay Briscoe in 13 minutes 4 seconds when Homicide pinned Daniels after a top rope ace crusher, so a three-way dance. On paper, this seems like kind of a random match. Like Daniels versus Jay Briscoe would have made sense because the next night is the Briscoes versus Daniels and Seidel for the tag titles. But why stick Homicide in here, especially in his first match after losing the world title? And I guess I would imagine, I don't know this for a fact, the real answer would be this is the usual. These names were booked for the weekend, and after the major matches on the card were set, they were left over and needed something to do. And my confidence in that, Matt, is bolstered by checking the old Wayback Machine and seeing this match was only announced days before the show. So, but as I always say about Ring of Honor in this era, they did try to come up with a reason for this match, albeit a flimsy one. Because, you see, this show was 5 years to the day of ROH's original show. And that show was main evented by a three-way. And these three wrestlers were all on the first show. In fact, more than that, Jay was in ROH's first official match against the Amazing Red. Daniels was in ROH's first main event, the three-way he was involved in there. And his manager, Allison Danger, was in ROH's first ever in-ring segment. And Homicide was also on that show. So ROH even goes the extra mile here, and they show very brief snippets of each wrestler's entrance from the first ROH show as they come to the ring, even Allison Danger, although in Danger's case, they also showed her being powerbombed through a table by the Hit Squad, because surely we needed a reminder of what that first segment in Ring of Honor was. But anyway, I would say this match was exactly both the quality of match and the type of match I would have predicted it would be before it started. Like, these are three talented, hardworking wrestlers, and they're a match that feels relatively low on the card and thrown together. And so from that, I'd expect a match that is kind of generically entertaining, three-way that has a decent amount of action, doesn't really have a story, nor a lot of novel moments, nor does it really swing for the fences. And to me, that's what this match was. There's a bunch of one guy waits while the other two do a spot. There's your obligatory one guy puts both his opponents in a simultaneous submission spot, which is actually one of the most novel moments of the match, where Daniels does a simultaneous Boston Crab and Camel Clutch with his two opponents on top of each other, which I actually thought looked pretty good. But overall, I would say this is a match I would call an honest effort. Like, they do enough to meet what I had going was very middle of the road expectations. I would say the most noteworthy thing about the whole thing would be the finish, where Jay and Daniels are fighting on the top rope. Jay gets knocked off, and Homicide then immediately leaps up to hit a top rope ace crusher on Daniels for the win. And to me, that kind of summed up the match as a whole, because it's a spot that's kind of neat, but it's also kind of flat in that it's a spot that never normally wins a match. That's just winning a match here. Although the live crowd really did like that end. And it was also kind of surprising initially when I was watching it to see Homicide pin Daniels, but it makes sense when you realize RH probably couldn't have their TNA talent do too many jobs. So the fact that you have two TNA affiliated wrestlers fighting each other means they were probably more likely to allow and be okay with one jobbing to, if it's lost a job, to the other one. And it also makes more sense when we realize Ring of Honor uses this as storyline rationale to book Homicide versus Daniels for WrestleMania weekend in a few shows. So I almost wanted to give this like a flat 3 stars and call it good, but it just didn't quite get there for me. And maybe I'm being a little harsh on this, but I would give this a very strong above average, but the crowd, I think, liked it a bit more than me, I would say. What about you, though?
Yeah, I don't know. I might have liked it less than you even. Like I'm probably around the same, honestly, but I guess I get what you're saying about an honest effort, but this is one of those matches where I would say the physical effort is mostly there because I would never want to take away from the hard work, but I think the mental effort of putting together an interesting match was not there. Felt like a bunch of moves done, and in the end, it just the action was pretty good, but it didn't feel like anything in totality. And I did think the ending was surprising because Homicide never wins with that move at this point. Um, but yeah, I didn't think this match had much heat at all. Like, I didn't think the crowd was that into it. Considering who was in it, I thought that was surprising. But at the same time, it's like, isn't it kind of malpractice to have Homicide just appear out here in a match like everything's normal and just do a match without reacting in any way, shape, or form to the fact that he just lost the title in a
Yeah.
surprise to Morishima? Especially Homicide's character being so emotional. He was screwed for so long. That title win meant so much to him. And then he's just out here the next week slapping hands on the way to the ring, like happy-go-lucky, more than usual even. Like,
No promo from him, even
yeah,
backstage or anything. Just,
if
yeah, it's just,
yeah,
you wouldn't even know.
if he had done a promo like, I wanted to win that title and I did, but the pressure was so hard. I feel like a weight's been lifted off of me, and that explains why he's kind of in a more jovial mood on the way to the ring. I would accept that. But here it's just like, oh, it's just like a normal day at the office after this huge title loss. I don't like when that happens. It's just too big of a deal for that to be glossed over. I'm sure at some point we'll get a Homicide promo about everything, but I don't know. It doesn't make any sense why there wasn't one here. And I thought that took me out of it a little bit. So yeah, I thought this match was not much. And considering, the show it was on and the wrestlers involved, I think it could have been a lot more. So I don't know if it's the TNA effect where you start having matches where these guys are just saving their not necessarily their physical energy, but their mental energy for the matches they have on these TNA shows. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But yeah, I wasn't really feeling this one.
This was another match also where they cut to Delirious in the crowd during it, watching just to kind of, build to his involvement later in the night. And I'll end by saying I thought it was kind of ironic where this is a match where they keep celebrating that like all four people involved, the three wrestlers in Alice in Danger, they were all here since day one of Ring of Honor. And obviously some of them briefly stepped out, but like all three of the four people involved in this match will be gone from Ring of Honor in a little over 2 months. So it's kind of fun, kind of crazy to realize, like this match is celebrating. Like, look how these people have been around, part of the company for so long, since the very start, and very shortly, almost none of them will be here anymore. But we next go to the Open the Brave Gate title match. Matt Sydal successfully defends the title when he defeats Austin Aries via pinfall in 13 minutes, 44 seconds after he hit a Sydal press. This is Sydal's first and only successful defense of Dragon Gate's Open the Brave Gate title, which is Dragon Gate's secondary singles title. This is also the first time a Dragon Gate title had ever been defended in the United States, so another sign of the growing Dragon Gate ROH relationship here. Matt, what'd you think about this? Probably like along with like the Richards Joe match, I would say probably from like just an on paper standpoint, probably one of the more looks good on paper matches on the card.
Yeah, although these two have had other matches, and some of them have been better than others, but I don't think any were like, wow, this match really blew everyone's mind, And you'd think that they could have a match like that, but I have yet to see it, including this one. Part of it was I was a little distracted by like trying to figure out how much of Aries' ankle injury was selling and how much was real. Because I have to think that a lot of it was real in the sense that we saw it happen. And he was definitely favoring it against Claudio. It's also weird to think that he's doing so much wrestling on this very bad ankle, and he was doing things like the heat-seeking missile where he was running pretty fast, so he was obviously able to move on it. And so I don't know, like he never, as far as we know, he doesn't like take time off to get surgery or anything like that, right? But it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But it doesn't seem like he's letting it heal either. So I don't know. I guess it's probably in the end like a sprain or something. It doesn't seem like he has like a broken ankle. Obviously, he wouldn't be doing what he was doing. But it played into the match, and he's hobbling a lot, but doing a lot of moves, and they both do some big moves and some of the stuff you'd expect. but it's not like a high-flying tour de force or anything. And I thought it built well to some of the big moves at the end, reversing, things like the Here It Is driver, the Brain Buster. Um, Eventually, Seidel wins clean with the shooting star press. But I do think there was awkwardness and hesitation, and I think it felt slower and lower energy than I'd expect, and the crowd heat was worse than I'd expect. I'd say this probably to me was the most disappointing match on the show. Not the worst match, definitely not, but another match where it's just like, this should have been extremely good to great, and it was just kind of good. And I assume Aries' injury played into it, but given that I've seen a few matches with them, and I think the best match they had against each other to me was probably like 3.5, 3 3/4 stars, and I'd say this one was closer to like 3 stars. I don't know. Maybe their chemistry just isn't such that they're going to have phenomenal matches against each other. I don't know.
Yeah, I was like you watching this match. I was almost distracted by trying to like detective work from watching Aries, like how much of this is him playing up the ankle injury and how much of it was real, because it was only a week since the big nearly killed himself ankle Quebrada spot at the Philadelphia show. So
At the New York show.
Oh, New York show. Yeah, yeah. Oops, mixed up the order. So yeah. So it probably is likely that it was still hurt, and he had been dealing with that injury since at least like I think late 2006, because I think he got hurt early, some point there. And yeah, this match plays off Aries' ankle. It's the story of the whole match. As even before the match even starts, if you eagle-eye viewers, if you want, pay attention when Aries does his usual normal entrance where he does that thing where he hurls himself over from the apron over the top rope into the ring and does a little rotating 360 hop. If you pay close attention in this match, even there, he makes a special effort to only land on his good foot this time. And again, I was watching stuff like that and going like, is he just doing that on purpose, like to sell the story, or is his ankle so screwed that like he doesn't even want to land on his foot in that sense? But also, Aries does something interesting here, and he adjusts his offense a bit. He doesn't do the drop kick to escape the head scissors spot that he always does. Like, instead, Seidel puts Aries in a head scissors, and that gets a "you fucked up" chant from the fans because they know Aries always escapes the head scissors and does a drop kick. But he doesn't do the drop kick. Instead, he does this really cool transition where he, like, spins in the air while he's in the head scissors and then, like, drapes his legs over Seidel's head and does his own head scissors out of it. And then, like, later in my favorite spot in the match, Aries, instead of doing his signature, like, running drop kick to his opponent in the corner, he does a forward roll into a shoulder block to the midsection. And the announcers, like, they do a good job pointing out, like, that's a deviation from what Aries usually does because he can't run like he normally does. But then Aries does something else he's been doing in recent matches where he guts through it. So, like, he is clearly laboring here. He's clearly not as fast on his feet. He's limping at times. But at the same time, he does most of his major spots. Like, he does the heat-seeking missile tope. Even the Quebrada he aggravated his injury on and nearly killed himself on in New York the week before. He hits it here. He does that running drop kick that I just said he avoided and did a cool variation on. Well, he hits it later in the match anyway. And to be clear, like, Aries is selling his leg after basically everything he does. And he's clearly not as explosive as he normally is, and at times is outright hobbling a little. But he also ends up hitting most of his normal stuff. And I would have loved them. It's kind of a theme for me on a lot of matches on the show where I would have loved them to go fully into the idea that Aries was physically compromised and couldn't do any of his normal stuff. But instead, they basically try and do this thing where a lot of ROH matches lately, and maybe for a while now, have tried to do, which is they try and have their cake and eat it too, where they want to do something a little bit different, a little story-based thing that's a bit different, but then they also still want to hit a bunch of their normal stuff and kind of have the regular stretch run to send the fans home happy. And I think a match where Aries wasn't hurt or selling being hurt and could have gone full tilt at a faster, more explosive pace would have been better than this. And I think a match where Aries really limited his offense even more than what he did here would have been more interesting to this than this. But there's enough from both of those worlds where I still think this middle ground is a good match. I probably would agree it's like a 3-star, maybe 3.25-star match. They clearly could do better, although like you said, I don't think we've seen them do a great match against each other. So it's hard to judge this one based on the injury, but you just feel like based on the talent of these two guys that they have to have something better in them against each other, capable, but I thought it was decent for what it is. I also thought you could notice Seidel's continuing to get a little more heely, like he's slapping hands on the way to the ring like a babyface, but when Aries gets tied up in the ropes in the middle of the match, he illegally tugs on his ankle against the ropes over and over again. And at one point, he tells her, like, I'll untie him, don't worry. And then he starts pulling on his leg. And it was also kind of interesting to see Aries do a clean job to Seidel here, just as he's starting a big new feud with Roderick Strong and talking about how he's going to start his own faction. But I guess the injury helps give him a little cover there. And also, he kind of had to lose this match because if you book the match, because he's facing a guy for another promotion's title, and I'm sure they're going to control where that title goes. But again, ROH didn't have to book that match. After the match, Seidel and Aries shake hands before Roderick Strong and Davey Richards hit the ring. They attack Aries, and Strong tosses Seidel out of the ring. They lay the boots to Aries until Delirious runs in from the crowd, tossing a chair, chasing Strong and Richards from the ring. Delirious grabs the mic and he cuts a promo, and Delirious ease on Roderick Strong and the No Remorse Corps. That gets a big pop from the crowd, as well as chants of what he said and blah, 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 blah. Delirious helps Aries to the back. So I wonder if people just for one night was like, oh, is Delirious going to join this new stable? But no, that's not the direction they're going in.
I liked that. Yeah, I actually thought that Delirious was going to join Aries' group for a while too, until eventually it just was clear he didn't. He was always like tangentially associated with them, though. Like in like at Death Before Dishonor later in the summer, he's part of their team, right? But he's yeah, he never officially joins the Resilience, but yeah, I liked the post match because it was quick and to the point. It got its point across very quickly, didn't belabor it at all, and I like that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's now intermission, and interviewer Rebecca Bayless is backstage. She notes it's 5 years to the day since Ring of Honor's first show, and then she says, and I'm happy I'm not in the same place in Ring of Honor that I was 5 years ago. And I thought, wow, an ROH burn from Rebecca Bayless. Kind of throwing a little smoke there. But
yeah, so who is she throwing smoke at? At Special K?
At Gabe Sapolsky? I don't know. But
and it's interesting that she says that in front of Lacey, that was sort of like Becky Bayless's first kind of ROH feud was with Lacey, even though they never really had a single. I don't remember if they had a singles match against each other before Becky left, but they were definitely put at odds against each other.
So tonight, Rebecca is joined backstage by Lacey and Jimmy Jacobs. Lacey tells Jimmy that it felt so great to have him at ringside supporting her tonight during her match, and says she's been impressed with Jimmy lately. He's really been stepping up his game. She particularly liked him choking Cabana with a guitar string today. She says tomorrow night when Jimmy faces Colt in a Windy City death match, wins and losses aren't important to her. She wants him just to kill Cabana. She then asks Jimmy to remember what she whispered to him last weekend, and says if he kills Cabana tomorrow night, she's going to add something to that, and she whispers something else in Jimmy's ear that he is ultra happy about. Lacey walks away.
She's going to buy him an ice cream sundae.
She's going to restring that guitar for him. Lacey walks away, and Jimmy says he thinks the winds of change are in the air. The season of love begins tomorrow, and he'll do anything to ensure that happens. He then does something kind of gross with his tongue. He kind of licks his lips in a way that unsettled me.
That's the point, Trevor. So good job, Jimmy.
So yeah, we're just again, this is your classic B show. A lot of just keeping the pots warm, but not really advancing things. Just hey, this feud's building to an end. We're going to remind you of that. We're going to remind you the feud's going on, but there's not really dramatic new developments. Next, we have Larry Sweeney come to the ring with Tank Toland and Mitch Franklin at his side. Sweeney grabs the mic and he calls himself the best agent in professional sports today. He says his main man, his protege, the number one athlete in Ring of Honor, is right now enjoying a very successful tour of Japan in Pro Wrestling Noah. Larry says
when he says the best agent in professional sports, I swear for a second I thought he said the best Asian, and I was like, that would be an unusual brag, even if he was Asian.
Larry says it's no coincidence that within 60 days of hiring Sweeney, Chris Hero's in Japan. Hero's enjoying first-class accommodation there. And when he comes back to America, it's going to be the same thing. Larry then introduces Tank Toland, who gets booed. Sweeney calls Toland a superior natural athlete, which gets laughs from the fans. Sweeney then emphasizes the word natural a second time, really leaning into it as the crowd chants bullshit. Larry says, when Chris Hero returns to the U.S., Tolan will become Hero's personal fitness instructor. Sweeney then turns to Mitch Franklin, saying he didn't tell Mitch backstage why he wanted him to come out right now, but it's because Mitch is the opposite of everything Tank is. He's an inferior athlete. Larry criticizes Mitch's lack of a tan and says Tank's left pectoral muscle probably weighs as much as him. Larry tells Tolan to show the world what's going to happen to Claudio Castagnoli, and Tolan proceeds to clothesline Franklin. The bell rings. The match is on. Tank Tolan, with Larry Sweeney in his corner, defeats Mitch Franklin via pinfall in 1:57 after he hit a sit-out spine buster. This was just a quick squash for Tolan, although Mitch did get a brief comeback with a couple head scissors late. Tolan got a very brief chance of steroids and you can't wrestle. And after the match, a few fans even chanted, "We don't care," as Tank did push-ups in Mitch's face. So I was going to ask you this, Matt. I don't remember what I thought about this when I watched it as it happened all those years ago, but like I feel like this might have been the kind of thing that I've really changed my wrestling taste on, because I feel like there's a chance, maybe not for sure, that I would have been like a bunch of those fans in the crowd who are like, this isn't, Ring of Honor, what Ring of Honor is supposed to be, which is like top tier in-ring wrestlers having like long competitive matches, blah, blah, blah. But now, like in my old age, I appreciate the gimmick. I appreciate the shtick. I appreciate something short and different. I think, it's pitch perfect casting of Tolan to be a personal trainer for Chris Hero, because it plays off both, the rep Chris Hero had that some fans heckled him because they thought he didn't have a good enough body, and it plays off the rep that people just like to rail on Tank Tolan for possibly having a chemically assisted body, we'll say. So I really like this kind of stuff today. I mean, it's not like go out of your way to see it, but I don't remember how I would have liked it back at the time.
Well, I think it actually, based on like what I saw on this show, I think it did kind of get over pretty decently, considering how kind of, uninvolved it is. It's so basic, such basic wrestling heel stuff, not much of a match. And I thought the crowd reacted better to it than, like, let's say, Aries versus Seidel in some ways. So I don't know if I would agree that the crowd didn't react well to it or that they didn't take to it. I think what this actually reminds me of is an ECW type of act. The whole Sweet and Sour Inc. sort of does. Just where Heyman would book a bunch of like misfits together, maybe with a more significant talent, and like they would all kind of be this kind of wacky sideshow. And I feel like that's what Toland is. And in that sense, I think that Gabe was using Toland to his strengths. There was something comedic about him. He obviously wasn't going to be the wrestler that you go to for the top tier matches, but you get something out of him to add flavor and character to Chris Hero's gimmick. And, obviously Sweetie was such a good talker that he was able to get over the idea of who Toland was and what he was doing there. And I think the crowd's reaction, those chants, those were playing into it. I don't think those were, that was the crowd revolting against what they were seeing. I think they were going along with the gimmick. So I actually think this, at least on this night, worked pretty well.
Yeah, see, I guess that was the thing where I was almost taking it as maybe they weren't quite as playing along, but I'm not sure. I think eventually it becomes them playing along, and it might have been, you might very well actually be right that they were already into playing it along here. I also think the ECW stable comparisons are really good comparison that I didn't think of. And also, obviously, again, a bit of maybe even revisiting the Embassy, right, where you have a very charismatic manager and kind of one, rather than like a group of guys, the structure's more like one wrestler that the manager's in love with, and they kind of surround them with like this goofy entourage that all is kind of like in service of that crown jewel, you might say. Which again, the Embassy was great, and
yeah, I mean, clearly Sweeney was the replacement for Nana at this point, so
yeah.
I think that comparison, that analogy, is completely apt.
And that brings us to a 6-man mayhem match. Claudio Castagnoli defeated Mark Briscoe, Matt Cross, Pele Primo, Roderick Strong, and Shingo in 15 minutes, 34 seconds when he pinned Matt Cross after hitting a pop-up European uppercut. We've seen a bunch of Ring of Honor scramble type matches. We don't too often see ones that go this long, that are positioned this late in the card, that have this much talent in them. How did you think it paid off, Matt?
I really had a great time watching this match. A few things led to it, I think, being, in my opinion, as good as it was. Although before I get to that, I do want to mention Matt Cross has a whole like Cobra Kai preamble to his entrance music that was like ahead of its time because the whole thing is No Mercy. But what I find interesting about it is he's wrestling Roderick Strong, who's in the No Remorse Corps, which is a lot like No Mercy. So maybe they could have, instead of being on opposite factions, they could have joined forces and made the No Mercy Corps. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And could that have been all based around playing a video game? Is the question that I ask you. But here's the thing that I think made this match greater than the sum of its parts. It is the fact that Pele Primo won 2 matches in 2006, 2 multi-man matches. And because he won those 2 matches, it made everything he did here seem more impactful, and every hope spot that he got seem like it was portending a potential victory. Whereas I think if those 2 wins hadn't happened, I think he would have just been kind of a joke. But because he was such a focal point, like everyone wanted to beat the crap out of him, especially the heels in this match who were at this point Claudio, Shingo, and Strong. Claudio was still being portrayed as a heel here. I feel like that storyline held the match together in a way. And in addition to that, there's still just a lot of cool moves. There was the one really notable spot that was super contrived, but I think the crowd liked it, was this whole submission chain where Mark Briscoe got a head scissors on Pele Primo, then Claudio Castagnoli came in and put an abdominal stretch on Mark, and then while simultaneously Strong comes in and puts a crossface chicken wing on Claudio, and then Matt Cross puts a leg lock on Pele Primo, and then Shingo gets a head scissors on Cross. So the only 2 people that are not in a hold here are Shingo and Strong. But that was very wacky, a 6-person pretzel, so to speak. And then Shingo and Strong are like the freshest guys after that breaks up. The thing that I always find interesting about spots like that is when everyone's in a hold like that, eventually like they just all release their holds for no reason. You know what I mean? Like there's never like any sort of like precipitating act that gets the hold to release. They all just are like, all right, well, I guess we're releasing the holds now. But then everyone tries to attack Primo. They fight over it, and Claudio just picks him up and drops down hard. And Primo does a really good job of taking continued punishment, but making sure it's not boring because he does pretty frequent hope spots. The Claudio's thing in this match is just getting mad when when the crowd says, "Hey," like he did last week. He's just much more assertive about protesting the crowd's haze. There's a spot where at some point everyone hits Pele with a really, really, really loud chop that makes the crowd go crazy. Like Strong does it at one point, Mark Briscoe does it at one point, Shingo does it at one point, and the chops really are very, very loud. At one point, Claudio chokes Pele with a tie, not a guitar string, but tie kind of does the trick too. Then there's a spot where Pele hits a head scissors on Claudio and hot tags Cross, and the crowd goes nuts. We get an ROH chant for that after Pele's big comeback and tag out. There's a spot where Shingo knocks Mark to the floor. Pele jumps off the top with a Thez press and a double stomp to Shingo, and we actually get a "This is awesome" chant. And then as down the stretch, we get a bunch of big moves. Strong hits the big gut buster off a military press on Cross. Then Strong blocks Mark Briscoe's springboard cutter and hits a sick kick off the middle rope. Then Strong hits Castagnoli with the Gibson driver, and the crowd pops huge when Primo breaks that up. Then Strong hits the torture rack backbreaker on Primo, and then that's when suddenly Aries chases Strong out of the ring. He appears, leaves Shingo to attack but Primo jumps over the top and Rana's Claudio to the floor. The Mark runs up the top rope, hits a sudden shooting star press to the floor on Shingo, which leaves Cross alone with Claudio. Or Cross is alone in the ring, excuse me. But Claudio cuts off his dive with a huge European uppercut after throwing Cross up, and gets the win. A great finish. I thought the crowd loved the match. It wasn't without its sloppiness because these six ways always are, but the crowd was just rocking and rolling so much. They were genuinely invested in Pele Primo, and I thought that elevated this match a lot. I thought that he was, in a lot of ways, the star of the match. He did a great job taking punishment. He did a great job with the hope spots. I thought that he was really great. Obviously there were a lot of legitimately fantastic, all-time great wrestlers in this match. So, but I thought he really held up his end, and I thought this match was the highlight of the show so far, easily. Even though Primo's chest looks extremely beat up here.
Yeah, I agree. I like this a lot. Like on one hand, on a card that could use a little more depth, having this many quality workers tied up in one meaningless six-man scramble seemed like a mistake. But on the other hand, in execution, this ends up being like one of the better ROH scramble matches they've done in a long time. The crowd went nuts for this. Like you kept pointing out that they had this is awesome chants. They were louder and more into this than they had been for anything on the show up to this point. And the first 5 minutes of this match had the pace and the energy of the last 5 minutes of a lot of scrambles. It was just breakneck right off the bat, and I was wondering how are you going to keep that pace up? And then the middle 5 minutes slows it down, but it slows it down simply because it becomes 5 straight minutes of the three heels, like you said, Roddy, Shingo, and Claudio taking turns beating the crap out of Pele. Pele takes a great beating as always, and like you said, it made that section compelling just as how good he is at being the underdog. And in particular, Shingo and Roddy hit some of the loudest chops I think I've heard in quite a while on Through the Years on him. My only negative with the section of this match was that the three heels tagged out so frequently while beating down a wrestler who was literally not fighting back much at all, in a sustained way, that I was like, it's one of those things where in a one fall to the finish match, everyone for themselves, why would you ever tag out when you're kind of dominating a guy that's clearly the weak link? But, they wanted to do it clearly. To do we see in a lot of these multi-man matches, they try and almost do tag psychology where let's have the heels isolate a babyface and, lead to a hot tag. And to be fair to them, it works because it gets a huge reaction when Pele is finally able to fight back and tag out. And basically from that point on, Pele is the most over guy in this match, one of the most over guys on the entire show. And this is another one of those multi-man matches where Pele really is the focus and the star, as just everyone wants to work with a guy who can take such a beating. And it's so easy for crowds to get behind him because he's so small and has such good, plucky underdog energy. I also thought Pele hit some of the nicest offense of his short RH career so far. He had a couple of really beautiful Rana variations, like that one where he flipped off the ropes to the floor into one I thought looked really good. Claudio I thought got to show off a little bit in terms of how great a base he is for people, which is something I felt like this was the one era where I was watching Jakara regularly along with Ring of Honor, and I felt like Claudio got to show that aspect of himself a lot more in Chikara than in Ring of Honor, and it was nice to see a bit of that here. It's a match where everyone gets to do at least a little something. I really noticed Matt Cross's body control. He's one of those guys, I compare him to Matt Sydal in his ability to, whenever he's off his feet, time seems to slow down a bit for him. Just the way he rotates in the middle of moves like a tilt-a-whirl head scissors. It is so smooth and precise in a way that a lot of other guys that can also do those moves, it doesn't have that kind of control to it. I thought the bit where Aries came out near the end to chase Roddy into the crowd was a bit weird in the sense of it makes complete sense because Aries is feuding with Roddy and it gives the booking it out so Roddy doesn't have to get the win, but he doesn't really lose the match either. But it's another one of those things where if Aries really wanted to go after Roddy, why do you wait till 15 minutes into a match and not just minute one when as soon as he comes out, And obviously the reason is because they wanted Roddy to be able to work his match. But overall, though, I thought this was one of the most fun scrambles RH has done in a real, long time. 10 minutes of really breakneck action with a high level of talent, bookending 5 minutes of Pele being brutalized, some really nice flippy-do body control stuff. I thought this was not quite 4-star great to me, but it was very good, 3 3/4 stars. easily the best thing on the show so far. Maybe it will end up being the best thing on the show, period. Who's to say? But yeah. I don't know what Pele would say, but I'm wondering, like, if I'm Pele well, actually, I'll say it after this next thing, because I'll just say, after the match, Claudio screams at the camera that this was for Sweet and Sour Larry Smee, and there's more of this to come. Pele, meanwhile, gets a really loud and long chant for the crowd. Like, he seriously might have been the most over wrestler on the show up to this point. He even chuckles, like, you can catch very quickly. He chuckles for a second, like he's almost like can't believe like how much the crowd loves him. And then he salutes the crowd. And then after Pele leaves, Matt Cross gets a brief M-Dog 20 chant as well. Now, I was wondering, like, I wonder, Pele, unfortunately, due to the concussions and things, he didn't have a very long career. I wonder if you asked him if this would be one of the highlights of his career, because this really was a night where it felt like just where, you didn't come away thinking like, oh, Pele's going to be a future star. He's going to get big things are going to come for him. But like, it's one of those nights where on this night, in this building, on this show, he was more popular and more beloved than a lot of more established guys. It's almost that feeling of, if you were playing a sport in high school and one day you played on a team that had a bunch of real guys who become future stars, and on one day you played better than them. Like, I wonder how he would feel about this match looking back, if he remembers it or, has fond memories. I wonder.
I feel like we could get that answer if we want.
Yeah, I think he follows me on Twitter, in fact. So yeah, but I mean, if not, he should have fond memories of this, because I thought this was a delightful little experience. And that brings us to the semi-main event, to some people maybe the main event of the show. Samoa Joe defeated Davey Richards via pinfall in 19 minutes 43 seconds after he hit a muscle buster on the god-danged ring apron, Matt. This is the first and only time Davey and Joe ever had a singles match against each other in ROH. And it's the second and final time they ever had a singles match against each other in wrestling, period. The other one was in PWG in late 2005, which I did not go back and rewatch, but from what I looked up online, it was a match that was mostly Davey getting the crap beat out of him. So this match is, a bit of a dream match at this point to some people. You have Joe, the king of the indies, versus one of its rising stars. They're also two guys known for hitting really hard. It's a match with no storyline done here just because Joe is leaving. RH isn't going to have another opportunity to do it if they don't do it right now. So, hey, we got to do it. To me, this match in execution was like an action movie or a martial arts movie, where you recommend the movie not because it's an incredible movie from start to finish, not that it's a bad movie or match, but because there are like a few incredible scenes in it, and the rest of it is fine enough, good enough to not discourage you from getting to them. Like, a lot of times, especially on the indies, dream matches don't need any context or any kind of story build up. Like Joe versus Kobashi needed no story, beforehand. There are moments in this match where I felt like having some context or build or would have helped. Like, Davey is a guy who simultaneously does the growly, hard-hitting ass kicker routine, but he also does the comical ass showing heel selling at times. And he, like in this match and a lot of matches, swing at the air as he's nearly out on his feet. On top of it, he's like newly turned heel in ROH. So in this match, you see like a bit of all three elements. You see a lot of, hard mano-a-mano training of strikes. You see just a couple little spots of the comical Davey, like where he does the handspring kick and Joe just does his calm walk away and Davey completely eats shit on it. And you see a little bit of the heel new Davey where he's being verbally cocky, he's boasting to the fans, he's cheating with multiple low blows. And for me, it's another one of those matches where I kind of wish they had picked one lane and went all the way down it rather than this approach, because the match never really settles into one vibe. It's closest to being a back and forth hard hitting war, but there's just enough of the other two elements where I kind of just wanted more of any of the three directions. Like, give me pure brutality with no room for any ass showing. Give me like a real dream match or gave me Davey being a real complete chicken shit heel. Like, to be fair, a lot of Davey's matches have elements of all three of those things, and I enjoy that. But on this night, I just got a match where it felt just scattered enough where it didn't quite fully scratch any of my itches, but it scratched all of them a decent amount. Anyway, but all that being said, match is enjoyable enough despite all that. EF selling feels just a little bit missing for me. Like, what boosts it is those few scenes, those holy shit standout spots. And there's one, Matt, which was we try and save our thoughts for the show, but occasionally if we are just excited about something or bored, we will mention it to the other one. Like, did you see that? Like, holy shit. And you had one of those because a few days ago, you were just messaged to me like, holy shit. There's a spot in this match where Joe hits one of the most brutal kicks I can remember seeing in pro wrestling.
You gotta screen grab this and post it.
Yeah, it is an absolutely brutal looking kick to the back of a sitting Davy's head. Davy rolls to the floor to stop, and the crowd has a Joe killed Davy chant. And so for those who haven't seen it, first I'm going to find your message just to get your reaction to it quickly. I got to look up the app. Multitasking. God damn it.
I could talk right here.
Trevor, what the fuck was that kick Joe gave Davey in all capitals, the rare all capitals from Matt Feuerstein?
I was hoping like you had some research into like the story of this kick, because it seemed like there has to be a story.
I'm traumatized by that kick you wrote. So for those who haven't seen it, there's an old adage in wrestling like that this guy hits people hard, but he hits them hard in safe places. Like the common example would be, you chop someone in the chest with a flat hand. You can hit someone really hard, but you're not going to do any serious injury more than some welts or maybe even breaking the skin, but nothing. And, you sometimes see with kicks, you can hit a guy in the meaty, like lower back, and you can kick them pretty hard and, combined with some thigh slaps and some kick pads, everything can make it seem really hard. And this was a kick where it's hard to know exactly where he hit because the camera had a great shot for it where they're shooting it from like Davies facing us. And so we don't really see where the kick lands perfectly from Joe. But from what we can see, it looks like Joe, instead of hitting like the lower or middle back, basically hit Davies somewhere either between the shoulder blades or his neck. Basically, I would say as high as you can hit someone without just kicking them in the fucking head. And it is loud. It is insane. The crowd reacts to it like, holy shit. And I don't think Davey was hurt. I think like he does sell by rolling to the floor and they milk it, but he didn't look the worse for wear. But it's one of those like, did Joe just aim high or something? Because that kick did not feel safe to me in the sense of if he was even like a couple more inches higher, that is just like a shoot kick to the head.
Kill shot.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just like, yeah, he does those kicks to the back all the time. This didn't just seem higher. It seemed harder. Like, I don't know if this was just like a something crazy happened. And that kick was crazy. Like, I know you said you don't think Davey was hurt. I think he was hurt. Like, not like injured to the point where he like missed time, but I don't think he felt the way he was supposed to feel after that move. And I think he probably did need those few. Like, I don't think it was just selling when Davey rolled to the floor and took a few seconds. I don't think that look in his eyes was just selling. I think he was knocked for a loop. Not necessarily. I don't know if it was a concussion because it wasn't to the head, but he had more than just the wind knocked out of him there.
I mean, as a wrestler, I will say, like, if I was a wrestler, well, I'd be
wrestler,
scared.
Trevor.
I'd be scared of if I was a wrestler, I'd be scared of every spot. But like, if I was a wrestler, even if that spot didn't hurt me at all, I'd still be pissed off about it because I'd be like, you're playing with fire there. Like, you are cutting it way too close. And like you said, that is not normally how Joe kicks people. It is lower.
Well, he did a few kicks, right? Like, he was doing his normal kick sequence. Did a few right before that. And then that last one was just astounding. Like eventually Trevor, well, I guess you'll grab it, but like people have to see this. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is just absolutely brutal. So then another big spot for me would be Joe is standing on the ring apron and Davey sitting on the turnbuckle in the ring, and Davey then grabs Joe and hits a tornado DDT where he spins over the top rope and drops Joe on his head on the ring apron, which is just another great, like, fantastic, holy shit kind of spot. And then you have the finish, which is Joe doing a muscle buster on the ring apron to Davey. And what I loved about that was Davey doing the ring apron tornado DDT earlier in the match gave them an organic way to get to this spot, because at the end of the match, Davey goes for it again, and it puts Joe in the perfect position to counter and then be like, oh, you like trying to kill me on the ring apron? Well, I can kill you on the ring apron too. And then he does the muscle buster on the ring apron, which again, I don't think Joe's ever done that, at least in Ring of Honor before, and looks great, looks absolutely deadly. And the other thing that this finish accomplished, I felt like, was it helps put Davey over even in losing, where this was one of the two spots in the match, that finish, where it felt like they did the all, we really want to put this guy over, but we can't because of outside reasons, in this case, probably the TNA thing. So we're going to try and give him a symbolic victory in other ways. So you have Davey not losing to the standard Joe finisher. You have Joe having to basically pull out like a crazy new variation he doesn't do. And then you also in this match had Davey survive the rear naked choke. And they made a real big deal of that. Like, it wasn't like Davey gets locked in the choke and quickly gets out of it. He really struggled in it for a while. There's a couple times where you think he's going to fight out of it, and Joe just sinks it back in. They even do the lift the arm and let it drop 2 times, and then the third time Davey starts fighting out of it. And in fact, immediately after the match ends, the first thing Prazak says is you have to give Davey credit for surviving Joe's choke. So clearly, probably Dave Prazak was told by Gabe, like, really sell how big a deal that is that, Davey survived this choke. So overall, I'd call this a very good match. It's a strong, good match to me that was elevated by those 3 or 4 like super memorable spots. I don't think it quite rises to the level of match that I think you'd want if you book this, which is one of those, oh my God, 4-star, how you have to buy a DVD just to see that match bouts that would have really elevated Davey even in losing. But it was good enough that it was not also like a disappointment. Like, I don't walk away from this going, oh, I was let down. It just hit the line, I felt like, of pretty high expectations.
Yeah, the stuff that you said about how like there's sort of like disparate tones that kind of took the match down for you, I think it enhanced the match for me. I would put this as a fully, truly great match, and I think it's a must-see match. I loved it. I thought this was the best Joe performance in a long time, including better than the Morishima match even. Not saying the match necessarily was better, although I don't think they were too far apart. But I thought Joe's performance, he really put on an effort here to do different things, to elevate the stuff, the moves that he did. Unfortunately, one of them was this insane kick that I think was just too much. But everything else, every other extra thing that he did, whether it was the intensity of his ole ole kicks and the fact that he did like 3 in a row and like got his legs stuck in the guardrail, and taking that's DDT on the apron, hitting the muscle buster on the apron, just just some of the early stuff in the match, like even during the slow feeling out period, he hits an enziguri early, a spinning back fist near the beginning. You don't usually see him busting out moves like that so early, and then it just elevates from there. And I think you did a good job of explaining, what Davey Richards brought to the match in terms of the intensity and just the various sides of his persona, the hard hitting kicks, but then also a little bit of the stooging. And I thought it all fit together really well. And yeah, I just think it created this intense, hard-hitting match, the likes of which we haven't really seen in ROH in a long time. Like, I'm trying to think of what matches to liken it to, and I'm thinking all the way back to, like, Low-Key and Joe in 2002. Like, that level of stiffness and hard-hitting. Or even like a Joe versus Kobashi, obviously nowhere close to the level of Joe versus Kobashi, but just that tone of just these guys are beating the shit out of each other, and just you feel like they gave everything by the end of this match. And I really appreciate that because you just didn't see it as often in this era of ROH. That kind of a stiff, just, I don't know, like almost like a passion play a little bit. Like that's the degree to which the violence and the physicality got to me. And I think that really elevated this match a lot. And, I appreciated seeing Joe get there again because it had really been a while since he had done that sort of thing in ROH. And, that Richards was game for it because he would be willing to do that basically whatever at this point in his career. He was so young and hungry. So I really love this. I think this is an easy 4-star match at least, and something that I think holds up now. And I think that kick was, to me, a negative in a lot of ways because I think it was just too much. But it certainly adds to the memorableness of the match, especially knowing in hindsight that no one was severely injured in any way.
The other quick little things I want to mention about this match, I'll point out Davey's theme music has now changed now. It keeps the intro to Running with the Devil, but now instead of playing the whole song after that intro starts, they switch to Charisma by Wasp. So classic heel move, you turn heel, you get new theme music. Crowd really in Dayton really gave Joe, I felt like, a big reaction. Lots of streamers, please don't go chants, fuck TNA. And going to what you said about like Joe putting in more effort, this was a night where Joe hit 3 straight Ole kicks, like in 3 different corners. I was going to do the fourth and the fourth corner until Davey counters it. And I almost feel like I wonder if you can gauge Joe effort level by like, it was almost like it's a night where, a band's doing the third encore. They never do third encores. They must be feeling it. It felt like Joe was kind of like, okay, guys, I'm leaving soon. I'll try and do it for everybody. I'll give you Ole. Everyone gets an Ole kick tonight.
But I also think he genuinely had motivation to have a great match with Davey Richards, who had been all the buzz on the indies over the past year. I think it wasn't just that he's leaving. I think it was that he was leaving and he had a lot of respect for Davey. Although, seeing that kick, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
Late in the match, Joe was throwing punches to the face. This is one spot I didn't like, where he's throwing punches to the face like he often does, and Todd Sinclair gets in between Joe and David to tell Joe, like, don't use close fists. And this is one of those spots I hate where Joe has done those punches a million times, likely more than a couple dozen in front of Sinclair himself, and he never reacts this way, but he does here because the match needs the ref to get in between them so Davey has the ability to do the low blow, which is one of those I hate when people react to the way they never react just because it conveniently sets up a spot they want to do. And the last thing I'll mention about this match, Matt, that kind of surprised me, maybe because we space out these shows because we're doing the podcast every 2 to 3 weeks, usually 3 weeks lately. But like, I was reading a review after I had rewatched the show and done all my notes, and they pointed out something. I was kind of shocked by it in this match where they said, this is the 7th straight match in a row Davey has lost in ROH. And I looked it up. He's in the middle of not just the 7th match he's lost in a row in Ring of Honor. He's going to end up losing 12 in a row. Like, he is like, he's
getting the Tony Khan push.
Yeah, exactly. And it's crazy because he does, after that ends, he does end up doing pretty well for the rest of the year. But it's one of those things, I wonder if that was like in their mind or what, because Davey, remember when Davey started Ring of Honor, he got like the kind of push that newcomers usually don't get in Ring of Honor, where right off the bat, he wasn't working like multi-mans or working 5-minute tryout matches. He was immediately like treated as someone significant. There was those rumors we talked about that they were even in considerations to like putting the world title on him against Danielson early. That never happened. And then, he got to feud with a like mid to upper mid carder in Jimmy Rave immediately and beat him all 3 times. And now you go from that and being Kenta's protege and all this stuff, and now he's going to lose 12 matches in a row. Yeah, it is the Tony Khan push. It's a weird thing that I didn't even notice until someone pointed it out. But right after the match, the crowd launches into a thank you, Joe chant. Davey takes a while to recover, but when he does, Joe offers a handshake. Davey instead spits in Joe's face, leaves the ring, flips him the devil bird as he leaves. Joe grabs the mic and says, that proves a point. If you smack your bitch around in public, she's bound to spit on you.
That's one of the more problematic things that I've heard a wrestler that I like say in a long time.
Yeah. Joe welcomes Dayton, Ohio to Ring of Honor and says he was glad to stop in Dayton for a couple of reasons. One, he says, is the weird same-sex love from some of the guys in one section of the crowd.
Which is also a little problematic, but but listen, he said it, I feel like, with a little bit of affection, so that makes it a little bit less bad, and the crowd chants same-sex love and he gives it a thumbs up. So I feel like that makes it slightly more wholesome than homophobic, but it's towing the line because he does say weird.
Joe says, even though Dayton has always been one of ROH's smaller markets, they've always been the fans with the biggest hearts, and they've had some hell of a good matches here. Joe says Dayton is always ready to party for ROH, and they appreciate it. Joe says a couple of years ago he was here with one of his best friends in the world, and they said no one is going to fucking stop them. So, of course, this is referencing the original Joe versus Punk 60-minute draw that happened in Dayton. They said that afterwards. Joe says a couple years later they're still here. Joe thanks Dayton, tells the fans he loves professional wrestling before leaving to another really loud ovation. And on the way to the back, and what's going to be the image for this show, something that I was so excited about, I shared it with you early. He grabs an old, I don't know who this guy is, he grabs an old bald man from the crowd and pulls him into a hug. And I don't know who this guy is. He was very happy. Joe was very happy to see him. The screen cap I have has it looking like he's almost nursing on Joe. It's a great photo. It's a great time.
That's a great way to phrase what you just said.
It is very much enjoyable and heartwarming. And
Yes.
another really good Joe Farewell stage. I like how he's been personalizing them. So even in Dayton,
he does a great job of like distilling down what like makes each market and city special, and I feel like he nails it each time.
Yeah, like obviously the Joe versus Punk match, that is the match to bring up if you're going to talk about Dayton and their history with Ring of Honor, and even acknowledging like, hey, you're not one of our biggest markets, but we love you. Just like that kind of personal touch. We then get a video highlight package labeled 5th Year Festival Matches of the Year. We see clips of the Seidel Delirious Final from Survival of the Fittest, the Cage of Death match, Joe versus Kenta versus Bryan Danielson, which seems like kind of an odd choice for me other than the fact that they're all big names. Aries is Strong versus Kenta and Davey Richards, Aries is Strong versus the Briscoes from the UK, Nigel McGuinness versus Marufuji, Nigel versus Danielson from the UK, Danielson versus Kenta, Danielson and Joe versus Kenta and Marufuji, and then the Dragon Gate 6-man tag ends the package. So, a lot of really good matches there, but I was like, Joe versus Kenta versus Danielson, really? The match where like two of the guys got fucked up and the match was kind of a mess, but ROH World Title match, our main event. Takeshi Morishima successfully defends the title, defeating BJ Whitmer via pinfall in 14 minutes, 10 seconds after hitting a backdrop driver. First off, Brian Alvarez's feud with BJ Whitmer that we've been covering on recent shows continues, as he wrote in Figure 4 Weekly at the time. We don't have a detailed report from Friday night, but all you need to know is that BJ Whitmer did not win the ROH World title from Takeshi Morishima. You may all sleep soundly now.
I think he was the only person on earth that was concerned about this.
Exactly. It was crazy. But and then before I ask you your opinion on the match, I thought I'd talk about these before because it kind of frames the match. Both PW Torch and Observer talked about the reaction to this match. We'll go with the Torch first. That they wrote several reports indicated that many fans exited the venue prior to the start of this match. The match was said to have been largely boring, with Morishima winning what amounted to being a glorified squash. And then in the Observer, Dave Meltzer would write, one thing noted by many people was Morishima was not really over this weekend as champion. Sapolsky even said that in Dayton, pretty much nobody knew him. A lot of fans left after Joe versus Davey Richards, which was the semifinal before Morishima's first title defense against BJ Whitmer. Gabe said he figured it would be tough for them to follow since Joe and Richards had a strong match, but didn't believe in using the world title match as a semifinal underneath Joe versus Richards, even though Joe was clearly the main draw all weekend. Morishima retained with a back suplex in about 15 minutes and something of a one-sided match. Sapolsky said when Joe began his long ROH title run that it took a few months before the fans got behind it and doesn't expect anything different here. Morishima defends against Kenta on March 4th at Budokan Hall, and there is a fan voting over which match will be put in the main event position, so it could headline. Either way, he sees that match as important for ROH credibility as a significant promotion since they're running 2 dates to Japan this summer, which is high risk. So, Matt, again, this is going to be interesting things to cover, I guess, so we can, I want your opinion on the match, but also, we'll see how it evolves and changes. But, like, early on, this was the talk of, like, kind of, like, throwing Morishima into the deep end of the pool immediately, and you were starting to instantly see some people getting a little nervous of, like, it's been a long time since Ring of Honor had a champion like this, probably since Samoa Joe, of a guy who wasn't already like, and even Joe had more of exposure and fan backing behind him in Ring of Honor. Even Joe probably more. I don't know if they've ever had a guy up to this point like this where it was really like the idea of what Gabe's saying. He didn't even think anyone in Dayton knew who Morishima was, which based on the reaction to that first segment that opened the show, I could see why you would think that. And that might have been the case. And it's a completely different reaction of a world champion that in a way is still having to introduce himself to a lot of the fans.
Which is why everyone needed to calm down, right? Like, I think people were just like really overreacting to obviously it was going to take some time to get over and, educate the audience of what it was. And that's okay. And I actually was going into rewatching this match, kind of remembered that feeling about this match, that it was boring, that it wasn't much. And, even I was like, well, Joe really should have been the main event of this show. But I will say this match exceeded my memory and expectations. It wasn't an incredible match. But I think they worked the match they should have worked. In some ways, it reminded me a little bit of the Bryan Danielson or Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar match that I talked about on the Danielson special, where the first part of the match was like a big time squash, and then by the end, the underdog figured out how to get to the dominant champion and get some pretty good near falls in, and with the wrist cuts exploder. And I think by the end of the match, the crowd didn't really believe that Whitmer could win, but I don't think the match like got no heat either. I think they enjoyed it, and I thought there were some fun spots near the end. I think the announcers did a very good job of putting over Whitmer's heart and fighting spirit. The one thing I will say though is, you could tell this was a match where they wanted to have a good match, but they were not really trying to have a great match. And the reason I say this is, and maybe they decided it was just too early in Morishita's run to have this happen, but you know how like in a match sometimes where you want to have an underdog get some really big near falls before losing, they will hit their big moves and get a bunch of near falls, but they will do something extra to elevate the later near falls, like for example, the champion takes a unlikely and surprisingly big bump, off the apron, on the apron, or someone hits their big move like 3 or 4 times, and the last one is like off the top rope, or the dominating champion gets put through a table. And they didn't do any of that, right? They didn't do that extra thing. They just had Whitmer, he hit a frog splash, he hit an exploder, he hit a wrist clutch exploder. He does all that stuff, and then he hit a big German suplex, a lariat, tried to choke Morishita out before getting a couple of backdrop drivers and a lariat. And getting some big kickouts of his own. But there was none of that like really surprisingly huge offensive move done by the challenger, or no unbelievably shocking kick out by the challenger to really elevate this to like okay, these guys are really going for the gold here. They weren't. They were going for a good match. I guess they would save the bigger Morishita vulnerabilities to later in his title reign. So I think in the end, though, I thought this was pretty good. I like that it started with to build on the story of Whitmer's heart and determination. I thought the announcers did a good job, and I thought the match was what it should have been. I think it was solid and better than people gave it credit for. Yeah, I mean that's what I would say. Certainly nothing you need to see, and again, probably Joe should have been the main event, but I don't think this was boring, and I don't think this was bad.
I felt like this was an interesting match. Like, on first blush, it might seem kind of crazy that Morishita's first title defense is against BJ Whitmer of all people. And, Morishita's an unknown quantity to many people, many of ROH fans at this point. He needs to get over quick since he's been given the top title almost immediately, and Whitmer's more of a mid-carder. But then I would say, remember, this show's in Dayton, Ohio, and something Gabe tried to do when he could in ROH was book guys in different markets as hometown heroes. Like, he had Punk and later Cabana in Chicago, and would like kind of peak big matches and programs for those guys in the city. He had Homicide in New York, and starting in 2006, he tried to do that with Whitmer, I would say, in Ohio, especially Dayton. Whitmer was born in nearby Kentucky. He came up through Les Thatcher's Heartland Wrestling Association, which was a largely Ohio-based promotion. So if you look at the last year, you had a couple of Whitmer's biggest matches and wins were saved for Ohio. He beat Super Dragon in Cleveland. He beat Necro Butcher in the rare for him main event in Dayton. So in theory, you book this match and maybe it doesn't sell DVDs, but I could see the thought of being like the local fans hopefully will be invested in Whitmer and be behind him. And Morishita is a guy who can crush them and get a strong reaction to start the reign off. Judging by the fact that apparently, I don't think that, like you said, I don't think the fans were not as completely not into this, like some of those reports seem to suggest, although I don't know how many of them left, as the reports also say, so, but the ones that were there, they reacted at some points, at some points they didn't. So I would say the first half of this match is about as one-sided as an ROH main event has ever been. Like, Morishima dominates it, and whenever Whitmer even tries to make a comeback, it's always him throwing strikes that Morishima completely no-sells before he takes out Whitmer with like a single strike of his own. So they're just really trying to sell, like, in a fist-cuffs battle, there is no match between these guys. And the crowd is kind of dead for it at points during like the beatdown. Some fans chanted "Next World Champ" for Whitmer before the match, so he did have his supporters. And there are moments of this match that do get reactions, including some minor chants for Morishima, but they come later. There's more dead spots in the start of the match. And this match has the challenge, I think I've already mentioned before, that a lot of these Morishima matches have, which is, or might have early on, which is they're trying to do something different from not just what ROH fans are used to in main events, but what the promotion is sold on. Like, ROH is built around selling DVDs and tickets based on match quality with these super competitive back and forth lengthy main events, often between highly athletic, sprightly, junior-sized wrestlers. And the first half of this match is a complete squash and somewhat more plotting in terms of its pacing. And then the match tries to have its cake and eat it too, where, Whitmer finally makes a comeback that sticks and becomes much more about these two trading shots and near falls the rest of the way. And that's, I don't know if you disagree with this, but like some of those reports saying this was a glorified squash, I felt the first half was a glorified squash, but I felt the second half was much more back and forth. Like, Whitmer does score some moves and he trades big spots. I felt like the Homicide Morishima title change did a really good job of finding that line between making Morishima seem like a killer and giving Homicide enough so it didn't feel like he was being treated like a jobber. Whitmer is obviously lower than Homicide on the ROH totem pole, but to me this match felt less integrated than that match. This match felt more like two different matches stitched together. Like the first half, they wanted Morishima to look like a killer, so they had him just completely squash Whitmer in the first half, but they still wanted to give the fans something resembling the kind of main events they're used to, so they switched back to the back and forth second half.
Well, like I told you, I kind of thought it was a lot like that Daniel Bryan Lesnar match. Not as good, but like I thought that match structure was very similar.
Well, I would say Morishima still wins definitively here. He looks strong, but if he really wanted to make a statement and be brave, part of me feels like maybe you should have just had Morishima squash him in a few minutes. And if you want to have the kind of main events ROH fans expected, then maybe you shouldn't have had the methodical destruction start. But I can see why you like the idea of the first half destruction leading to like Whitmer finally mounting a comeback.
Yeah. This is the exact match structure I would have booked, so I don't have a problem with it.
See, I think what we learned between this and maybe our contrasting reviews of Davey Joe is you don't mind getting the gravy mixed up on all the different food items on the Thanksgiving dinner. See, we were recording this the day before American Thanksgiving, so timely reference.
Yes,
but
though I don't really eat any of that stuff, but yes, definitely, for sure, it's exactly that.
I'm the kid that like if the pea is tonight, at least on this show, I'm the kid that like if the pea touches a mashed potato, I'm not eating anything on my dinner plate. And I guess I was that kid for a while when I was young, but I got over it. But I felt like the fans liked Whitmer here, but I don't really feel like the response really built. It was more like once the match got back and forth, they were kind of into it. But Morishima does his signature crowd-pleasing big man athletic spots that we've been seeing in every match from him. He does the handspring into the corner attack, the missile drop kick. But he did pull out a couple new little wrinkles I liked. The reverse choke slam where he grabs the guy by the back of the neck and throws him down face first, I really like. And he does like a Uranagi move that I think is supposed to be like a Uranagi suplex, but ended up being like halfway between a suplex and a slam, which I thought looked really cool. The other interesting thing in this match for me was the commentary. I felt like Prazak and Lenny Leonard, who is a duo I normally like, were in super duper hard sell mode for Morishima the whole match, being very loud and almost never shutting up to the point where I started to wonder if they were trying to make sure you could never notice the moments of the match where the atmosphere was kind of quiet. And they try and sell that the stakes of this match are that if Morishima wins, he's already committed to working some Noah dates, and those dates would cause him to miss ROH's UK double shot and the WrestleMania weekend double shot. And so they keep kind of selling how disappointed it would be to not have the ROH world title defended on 4 of the biggest shows the company are going to run all year. And they're painting Whitmer as the company's only hope to stop that. I think they might even say only hope. or Last Hope. And they don't quite sell it as a heel move for Morishima, but it's close. But at the same time, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, because they're also trying to sell, well, if Morishima does win and goes to Japan, he'll be defending the world title against Kenta in Noah in the Nippon Budokan in front of over 10,000 fans. And it's one of those things where I don't know what reaction ROH wants from me. Like, do they want me to be mad at Morishima for not defending the title on those big Ring of Honor shows? Because to me, that would be Ring of Honor's fault for offering him a world title shot without locking him down to those other future dates. Where it's like, I'm not like, ooh, boo Morishima for going back to your home promotion for obligations. But overall, I do respect what Gabe and ROH were trying to do here. They were taking a risk, a big swing. They were pushing a different kind of guy straight to the top and pushing him in a bit of a different way. They're kind of making him a heel, but not a cheating heel, more just of a monster heel who in each of his matches, like this one, jumps his opponent before the bell rings. But he's so strong, he can beat them straight up without cheating. But so far, it does feel like they're trying to stick one foot in trying something new while putting another foot in not completely abandoning their normal bread and butter of trying to give you DVD selling matches. So overall, I'd call this like a low good, like a 3-star, 3.25 star, maybe. So I probably liked it a little bit less than you. I felt like the first
No,
half.
I'm pretty similar. I would say. I just think I'm not against that. You know.
Yeah. Or like you were saying, your memories of this were so low that this was like a pleasant surprise. I would imagine, right? That you got a match that was not like just
boring.
Average.
Yeah, I thought that was. I thought it was going to be like a snooze, but it wasn't at all.
I don't think this is boring. Yeah. So we're in agreement there. So the first half, I think it's better than those live reports suggested.
For sure.
The first half isn't thrilling, but it is novel for ROH main events, and the second half I thought was completely enjoyable, back and forth action. So altogether, again, is this a DVD selling match that was really going to raise Morishima's stock? No, but it was perfectly solid. And I also noted that Whitmer, when he did his frog splash on Morishima, hit Morishima right in the ribs with his knees. That felt like it kind of sucked, but maybe not the worst one of those moves on this night, with judging by the Davey Richards match, but not the only kind of sucked move of the show. But we then go backstage where the Briscoes are waiting. Jay says it's been 6 months since they've had a title shot. They've only gotten better in that time and are looking forward to their tag title shot the next night in Chicago. Mark says Chicago's where their first ROH tag title reign ended, and that's where their third one is going to begin.
You already see Jay's in promos improving dramatically from even where he was in 2006. Mark's not quite yet, but Jay was already seemed like a good promo here.
And then we cut somewhere else backstage where Austin Aries is back talking an extreme close-up, but this time, Matt, an extreme close-up with a purpose, because he's talking to people we can't see because they are building a cliffhanger here. Aries talks about how Roderick Strong is starting his own group, and so Aries is going to start a new group of his own as well, just like what he did with Generation Next. He thinks these mystery people have the qualities he's looking for, and he wants them to throw them a rope to help them climb up the ladder and lead the way. We then end on that fifth-year festival standard show ending to be continued graphic. So who was he talking to? You will have to buy the next DVD to find out. And that is the fifth-year festival, Dayton. Matt, before we get into our final thoughts, who wins the Matt F. Trophy for this episode?
You know, there were only two people that I was even considering here. And while I, in some ways, thought that the passion of Davey Richards here was going to get him over the hump, I have to go with my sentimental pick and give it to Pele Primo, who I think just had like you said, almost like a career night here, was a superstar, got some of the best reactions, put on a great performance. I was really happy for Pele here, so Pele is our winner of the Matt F. Trophy.
Yeah, in the short history of the Matt F. Trophy, there are a lot of shows where, like, I honestly don't know what you're going to pick. And then there was a show like this where I was, like, thinking, I will be shocked if Matt doesn't pick Pele Primo. And
there you go.
I was correct. So on the show, I thought it was a decent B show. I think the one disappointment would be the fifth-year festival had the conceit of, like, them trying to replicate what they did the year before with the Milestone series, where every show in this branding was supposed to be like a super major show. And I felt like this was the one show where, if you look at every other show that comes before and after this in this fifth-year festival, they all have something really significant on paper or something that does happen, whether it's a big title change or a farewell match or a feud-ending blow-off match or a big angle or more. And this is the one show where You don't get anything. The most significant thing would be Joe having one farewell match on a tour of them, and I guess if you're really reaching that, a Dragon Gate title got defended in the U.S. for the first time, but it wasn't a particularly amazing match. Again, by B show standards, fine. By the idea of every show in the series is going to be a banger, that a really significant show. It's the one show that kind of lets down, especially when you consider that, like we mentioned earlier, if it hadn't been for Davey Richards getting hurt and missing the previous weekend, this show would have had the Jimmy Rave Joe match in place of the Davey Richards Joe match, which I think would have been a very big downgrade for the show. No offense to Jimmy Rave, but that match didn't turn out to be anything special at all. But overall, I think my match of the night probably would have been the Scramble by just a little bit. It's one of the better Scrambles I can remember seeing in Ring of Honor. But on top of that, the Davey Joe match is really, again, has some mind-blowing spots, was really enjoyable too. And there's some other decent stuff on the card. I think matches, I think that you and I were both saying in the review of, like, a lot of above average or just kind of good. A lot of, hovering around the 3-star area, which, again, it's a B show, kind of B show.
Yeah, I would say I think I probably like the show more than you, just because I think everything after intermission hit on some level for me. Even the Tank Tolan thing I thought was enjoyable, and I think the main event a little more than you, even though I think in the end we kind of peg it at the same level of quality. I think I just had a more enjoyable time watching it, I think, sounds like, than you did. And I definitely think that Joe against Richards was a great match. I thought that the Scramble was pretty close to a great match. So I thought that after intermission half was quite good. I thought the before intermission half was fairly mediocre, a bunch of fine stuff, but really nothing that I would say anyone has to see. And that is disappointing when this is supposed to be part of a significant series. I don't think it was worthy of that distinction of being part of the Fifth Year Festival. And yeah, this is definitely more of a B show than anything on the Milestone series. So I think I don't think they quite put their best foot forward here, even though I think in the end it was a pretty good show, with some really good stuff on it. But yeah, I feel like they could have done a little better for Dayton's spot in the Fifth Year Festival.
So that will be the show. So if you want to, for us tonight, if you want to contact us, through the years at gmail.com. ThROH, of course, is how you spell through. That's the only way you spell through in any word, any sentence, any usage ever. Yes, that's how you spell. If anyone tries to tell you there's a U and a G, and just tell them to fuck off. At Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter, and also now we are both on Blue Sky, so trevordame.bsky.social and mayormgf.bsky.social. So we are fleeing like everybody else does. And so next time on the show, we will be covering the second half of this double shot, the Fifth Year Festival, Chicago, Joe's final ROH match for this run in the U.S., where it's a big tag with him teaming up with a Homicide to face Morishima again, along with Nigel McGuinness. We also have Colt Cabana and Jimmy Jacobs blowing off their feud in a Windy City death match. We have the Briscoes going for the tag titles. Will they win it? Spoiler, yes, they will. And and the first member of Austin Aries' new stable is revealed. So it's definitely more stuff on paper to dig our teeth in than this show. But this show was fun too. All our American friends, have a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you play the show during your dinner. That's what you should do. Whether they like it or not, make them listen to non-fans in your life. So until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.